Welcome to Next Level Podcast with Camille Babin, author, speaker, and soul coach. Each week you will hear stories, insights, and strategies on how to become your authentic self and live a life of purpose. So let's get started for the message of today. Hello and welcome to Next Level Podcast. I'm your host, Camille Babin. Thank you for joining me for another episode. Today I won't be long, but I just had that message on my heart that I felt very strong about, and I know I had to release it. And it's really a word of encouragement. Throughout the day and even for the past 2 or 3 days, I've kept hearing those words, precision and specific. And when I was thinking about specific, I could see also how they intertwine. You know, when you say specific and you say precision, they kind of go hand to hand. And I asked the Lord, what are you speaking about? And he said, in this season, there are specific assignments. There are very specific instructions that God will give us. There is specific direction. And it's really the time for us to be single-minded. It's the time for us to remain focused. It's the time for us that as we remain alert, but we also have our attention centered on the Lord. And we have witnessed already so much, confusion and distraction. And this is not the time for us to be confused or distracted. We have to be single-minded. We have to, just have one, I will say, have one plan and one plan only, right? There's no time right now. This is not the moment. This is not the season for any other plan than God's plan. We have to go full force with what God is speaking concerning us. It's no longer the time when, and I even want to go further and say that it's not the time now to have a corporate word. Yes, it's great. We will still gather together. We still have that. I'm not even going on that to that aspect at all. But what I'm saying is now we have to be very intentional in seeking the Lord for ourselves. We can no longer take the word of someone else as our own. We need to have a personal revelation and even relationship with God to the point that the instruction that He gives us is very specific to us. That's really what I felt in my spirit. And the Lord led me to the story of David. And again, I was smiling because I said, for the past 2 weeks, we've really been on David. And I can't tell you why. I'm just being obedient and releasing it as He gives me without trying to, understand why so much David. But this time we go to the story that we all like and we all are familiar with, and that is the story of David and Goliath. And although I do not want to do a study on David and Goliath, but I just want to highlight those few elements that I think are very important right now for us to understand what God is speaking. We see that David was a shepherd boy and never thought, like of himself as anything else but a shepherd boy. And I think he was content with his sheep. He was content, even, I want to say, being the forgotten child. And all of a sudden there is this giant that is appearing, or that is taunting the people, that is threatening them and defying them, and we see David all of a sudden being aggravated in his spirit. We see David now, being filled with that righteous anger, righteous indignation, and David all of a sudden now rise up as a soldier. David is now, he no longer wants to remain in the pasture, but he said, no, like, don't you see what is happening? Don't you see, that this giant, this one is just standing out, speaking against God, and you are not going to say anything. You're going to be quiet. So David just could not stand it, and he knew that there was something he had to do. But let me pause here before I go even further. I want to say that because David was the chosen one for this task, that's why he was bothered. That's why he felt that indignation within him. That's why, because I bet there were probably other people that have stood against the people of God many times, right, that said maybe foul things and did wrong things. And I don't think David was bothered. I don't think David felt concerned. He was still in the pasture doing what he was supposed to do. However, when this moment came, David couldn't, just sit back and watch. Why? Because he knew that was his mission. He was able to discern again the specific assignment. He was able to recognize that that was his job. That was, it's like it just felt like he was the only one carrying the burden. And I want to tell you, in this moment, in these times that we're entering in, we have to be careful not to judge other people, because they may carry a burden that you don't carry. Doesn't mean that it doesn't come from God. It only means that it's not your assignment. So my advice right here, right now, will be for us as people of God to, instead of judging, when we see something or we hear something that doesn't seem quite right, or we feel like we have any type of reservations about, instead of judging, instead of speaking evil against it, or saying things that will even ensnare us and even tire us, we have to seek God's wisdom. We have to pray and really seek the Lord on it. And once we get the signal from the Lord that this is Him, all we can do is just, pray for those people, support them. It may not be your fight, but if it's theirs, don't stand in the way. That was really a side note. I didn't even intend to go that way, but I felt like that's really a point that the Lord wanted me to highlight. So let's go back now to David. So David rise up, and he said, okay, with this uncircumcised Philistine, basically is ready to fight. And he goes, present himself before the king, who's Saul, and say, hey, listen, I'm just paraphrasing, of course, listen, just basically give me your blessing. I want to fight this giant. I see what he's been doing for months now, for days, he got to stop. I need to do something about it. And as he was going, Saul now tell him, this is my armor, take it on and go fight with it. And, it can feel, I want to say, for a moment, it could have felt like an honor. It would have been a privilege, right? Having the king, right, giving you his own armor. Today, I think in today's world, it's just as if you see, like, let's say the king of England, or even the president of a country giving you his personal armor. So that would feel like, whoa, who am I, right? It could have really gotten into a person's head. David put it on out of respect, I believe. Put it on, and then he realized that this is not for me. This is not working. And I think the question he probably, or maybe the realization that he had was, why would I show up in front of this giant pretending to be who I'm not? Pretending to be Saul, wearing his artillery, wearing his armor, his uniform, when I'm not Saul, I'm not him. Why am I going to come, with someone else's strategy instead of going with mine? So this is a message already for somebody, that you've been trying to do things the way other people are doing instead of owning your own. Because I'm sure when Saul looked at David, he saw David just plain. David didn't look like a soldier, because David was not a soldier. David didn't have all the swords and, all the weapons that were probably necessary, he thought, to defeat that giant. So, of course, for him, he judged him already, like, this is not enough. You will never be able to defeat him the way you're going, the way you look right now. And I think for some of you that are listening even to this message today, maybe that's what you've heard for the past year or even more, maybe all your life, that, you've never felt like that you measured up. You never felt like you were good enough. You never felt like whatever you had was sufficient. It's always, like, if I had this from this person, if I looked this way, or if I spoke that way, or if I did things that way, and all these different things that always make you feel insecure, that makes you feel like, you just can't compare. You're not the person for the task. And today I really feel that message in my spirit, that God is saying, yeah, you are enough. You are enough. You are enough the way you are. You don't need to pretend to be what you're not. You don't need to go with someone else, like artifacts. You don't need to take what's not yours, right? You just need to be who you are and arrive at that place the way you are. So here we have David now putting on that armor, realizing this is not a fit. This is not me. I'm not going to do it. I'm David. I'm just going to be content with who I am. And I think even here, it also talks about us walking in our authentic life, with being authentic. knowing that God didn't make any mistake the way he created us. We don't have to change the way we look. We don't have to change and do things that are not us. And sometimes when you do it, you know that it's not you, right? Even I remember when we're much younger, and with our friends, sometimes when you do something, they'll be like, why are you talking like that? Because they can tell that this is not you, that you're acting different. And it's really like that. We have to make sure that we remain who God has called us, because God didn't look at David based on his uniform. God didn't look at David because of his military training, which he had none, but he knew what he has placed inside of him that was enough for that battle. That was enough for the fight. So I want to remind you today, or maybe to tell you if that's the first time that you hear it, that you are enough for the task at hand. That God has chosen you, not based on your record, not based on your abilities, not based on your strength, and even your look and your appearance and all these different things, but he knows what is placed inside of you. And that's why now he's placing a demand on what's inside of you, because he knows it's there. So we see David going and facing the giant. And there's really that thing, I think that's the most important part of my message today. When David faced Goliath, and of course, Goliath had a few words that he had to tell him. But David answered, he said, you come to me or against me with swords and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. And you've probably heard that over and over, that David, defeated Goliath, and he had a slingshot and he had 5 stones, which is true. And he even threw that one stone and pierced the forehead of Goliath. That's how Goliath got on the ground, and he was able to get his Goliath's own sword and cut his head, as he said. But let's go back a little bit. When he said, I come to you in the name of the Lord, and that's when he said, I will use the sword and I will cut your head, right? How did he do that? What he declared didn't come from it wasn't attached to the sword. It wasn't attached to the slingshot. It wasn't attached to the stone. He only went with the word of the Lord. So really today, what I want you to hear is, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're seeing right now, no matter what you've been tasked to do right now, you want to make sure that you go in the name of the Lord, that you have a word from God. That's the only thing that will remain. That's the only thing that can sustain you. That's the only thing that can guarantee your victory and your success. I think most of us, especially if you haven't been raised in church, and even that, we tend to think that it's the degrees that we have, it's the connection that we have, it's our own qualities or our personality traits, right? We're likable, or we have these abilities, or we have this skill and these talents and these gifts. Yes, they're great, and we need all of those things. We sure do. But at the end of the day, they amount to nothing if we don't have a sure word from the Lord. So I want to tell you, it's not just being prepared the way you think you need to be prepared. Like having, yes, you cross your T's and you dot your I's, great. But make sure that you get a word from the Lord. And I will really challenge you that if you don't have a word from God as to what to do in this season, don't move. But really, do not move without a word from the Lord. That is the most important thing. That's the only thing I think that even allowed David even to stand in the face of Saul and literally reject the armor of the king without fear. The only way David was able to stand before Saul and say, I will not take your armor, I'm just going to go the way I am. It could have been regarded as disobedience. You're disobeying the king. That's like really defying the king. That is right. Today we will say like standing in contempt of court, but it could have been perceived as such. But why did he have such courage and such boldness? Because he knew who sent him. He knew that God was backing him up. And I want to ask you today, who's backing you up? Don't just go because you see people going. It's a season where we will see a lot of activities, a lot of movement. But I don't want you to be, I don't want you to fall into that trap. And you will just be deceived and also get moving because everybody's moving. It's just that reflex that we have, or that instinct. When we see people running, we just run. But today, I really want to caution you. I want to warn you. We need to have our eyes, our spiritual eyes open, and exercise wisdom to know what move to make, when to move, when not to move, what to say, what not to say, what to get into and what to remove ourselves from. It's very important that you will get that specific direction, specific instruction for you. And we have to be okay not doing what people expect us to do. We have to be okay being different. And I'm not saying being different just for the sake of being different because we just want to show up, but being different to be in line with what God has called us to do. Again, my mission might not be yours in this season, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that what I'm doing is not from the Lord or what you're doing is not from the Lord, as long as, we seek the Lord really to know what his heart says, what God has for us. So it's really my encouragement today to you, and really that small challenge, that you'll go back to the place of prayer. You go back to your secret place. You go back to having that communion and conversation with the Lord and have that personal revelation of what he's speaking to you. Or maybe you got a word, but you're not so sure about the steps. You don't know the details. Don't try either to take other people's strategy and apply, because sometimes we can see, like maybe you see your friend or people around you and you're like, it feel like we're in the same season. We're going through the same things. You may be going through the same challenges, or you may be going even through, it can be the same joys and the same, blessing. Maybe it's a season where everything is good and you feel like, oh, we're on the same mountain, everything is good. And because they get a word from the Lord or they get a direction, automatically you feel like, okay, I'm going to do the same. Do not apply. You cannot apply other people wisdom and strategy that they receive from the Lord to make your own. You have to make sure that you get a word directly from the mouth of the Lord, directly from his word. That's the only thing, again, that can guarantee your success and your victory. So I want to leave you with that. I said I will not be long today. So I thank you for listening, and I bless you in the name of the Lord. And I really pray that this message will stir something inside of you, that it will cause you to really seek the Lord and to even stand in what is calling you in this season and what is showing you that is specific, even if it goes against the grain, even if it doesn't have the approval of people, because at the end of the day, the only one that we seek to please is the Lord. Not man, not anything else, but just be in line with what God has spoken. So I bless you in the name of the Lord, and by his grace, I'll be back next week. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for listening to Next Level Podcast. For more content, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Camille Babin. Until next time, embrace your power to become.